I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
A lot of people have an interest or a passion, and they'll explore it themselves, but it never turns into anything. You actually did something. You created a website. You kind of recruited other people to help. What do you think was that impetus to do rather than just think, oh, wouldn't this be a neat idea?
Atlas Obscure is mission-driven. We have a mission. We want people to experience that sense of wonder that we crave. And we have a feeling that it's a good thing, and that when people experience it, they recognize it as a good thing.
But I feel like you have this talent of actually doing, whereas a lot of people don't do.
Well,
I don't do when I have a good idea. I often don't do it. How do you identify an uncomfortable situation?
Oh, your body can tell you when you're uncomfortable.
But like, let's say right now I challenged you and said, okay, tomorrow I want to do something that makes me uncomfortable. And as you put it really well. Starts out as a thread, but I want to follow that thread to see how far I can go. And that's the story. At the end is somehow the story, or the process of following that thread to the end is the story. So what's the process of coming up with an uncomfortable situation? I know it when I see it, but how do I start seeing it?
What are you curious about?
Eventually I'm going to die, but what can I do, or what can I create in this world that's a location that other people might want to see, that's so interesting, and as we keep using the word obscure, but so interesting and obscure that people say, I can't see this anywhere else. I'm going to explore this.
I love the way you just framed that. I hope all of your listeners will actually take that question and try and come up with an answer to it.
So, Josh Foer, you've been on the podcast before. Thanks for coming on again. You were on before for Moonwalking with Einstein, which was an excellent book. That was a New York Times bestseller, right?
Yeah.
And it was about how you at first were covering the U.S. Memory Championships, and then you decided, like, what the heck, I'm going to become the U.S. Memory Champion, and you did in 2006, and then you wrote about it, and that was the book, was you kind of not only covering this subculture of people obsessed with improving their memories, but you deciding you were going to be the memory champion of the entire country. Why not?
Yeah, that was the book, and it was fun to do that podcast. It's great to be here doing this with you in person, because last time we were on the phone, and
yeah,
it's much more fun to be here in person.
Now I do them all in person because I find that people would always like them when I would do them on Skype, like the last one we did on Skype. But when you take that next step in professionalism, like improving the audio quality, it allows people to say, hey, not only do I like this, but the quality is good enough, I'm going to recommend this to my friend. And so I find that it's just improved the general downloads and everything of the podcast. Plus, it's I like the interaction in person.
Yeah, it's much better to talk with somebody face to face than over a phone.
So now you have a new book, Atlas Obscura.
Right.
And I didn't know about this book, but I saw like a few months ago that you were writing this book, Atlas Obscura, and I looked it up, and it seemed totally fascinating to me. And I'm going to talk about my own personal experience of actually doing one of the things in this book. Well, describe what the book is about.
Okay, so the book is a guide to the world's hidden wonders. So it's
hidden being the key.
Hidden and wondrous being the key. So it's all of the kinds of amazing places that you, like, when you first hear about them, you're like, does that really exist? Is that real? And yes, these places are all real, and we've collected them from all over the world.
When you say we, you've built up like this huge team around this, like it's a company practically.
It is in fact a company. And this started basically as like an art project. It was me and my co-founder, Dylan Thuris, wanted to create a resource for people like us out in the world who are looking for, like our favorite kind of museum is the museum that's open from 2 to 3:30 p.m. on Tuesdays, and you have to ring a doorbell to get in.
Like the secret places.
Yeah.
Kind of like, you know what, there's like a cool factor to all these places. Like if you are in a city and you happen to know one of the places mentioned in this book and you're taking like a date out to just show up at one of these places, there's a little bit of a cool factor.
This is a good book for finding date spots. But I mean, like tourism and travel has become so homogenized. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, it's like, you go, you stay in the same hotels, you eat the same food, you go to sites that have been, TripAdvisor approved, and like we're always looking for experiences that feel more real, that tell you something about the world, that are not sort of part of some commodified, packaged experience. And this book is really trying to collect the kinds of places where you can have those experiences.
So before we get into the kind of more obscure details of Atlas Obscura, I want to first ask you, what would you say is like the most outrageous place mentioned in this book?
Oh my God, the most outrageous. That's hard. So there are over 700 places in the book.
And then there's a lot more on your website, atlasobscura.com.
The website has over 10,000, and they've been submitted by users all over the world.
It's like the Wikipedia of obscure places.
Exactly. And then this book was like picking the very, very best from the website.
And I should mention, as we speak, this is ranked in the top 10 of all books on Amazon right now. So that's incredible.
It's had an amazing
Because usually
launch.
it's just erotica in the top 10 of all. It's erotica now and Atlas Obscura.
And Bill O'Reilly. So yeah, but that's I don't know if we'll catch Bill O'Reilly.
Well, I just read he sold 250,000 copies of his latest book in the past week.
Well, then let me tell you, we will not catch Bill O'Reilly. So the most outrageous place. I can tell you the most outrageous place I think I've been. And Dylan and Ella, our other co-author, have tried to visit as many of these places as we can. Obviously, we haven't visited all 700 on all 7 continents, but Dylan and I spent a summer traveling around South America, searching out Atlas Obscura spots. And I mean, one of the really terrific ones that we went to was the last Incan grass bridge.
The last Incan grass bridge.
Right. So
what's a grass bridge?
Yeah. Okay. So 500 years ago, when the first Europeans were arriving in Peru, encountering the Incan Empire, they found these incredible grass suspension bridges all over the Andes. This is how you got across valleys in the Andes. Remember, Europeans didn't invent suspension bridges until about 400 years later, and these were bigger and spanning greater distances than anything the Spaniards had ever seen.
You know what? I'm an idiot. Like, define a suspension bridge for me.
Okay, so not on pilings, but really hung between 2 cliffs.
Okay.
But made out of grass. And
so the grass, like, are they like woven together?
It's woven
Each grass like woven to another piece of grass?
Yeah. And so at the time, these were all over the place, and they were incredible. And, the Bridges of San Luis Rey is about an Incan grass bridge. There's only one left. And it's in a very remote part of Peru. And Dylan and I went and found it, tracked it down. I mean, it involved like asking lots of people, do you know where the grass bridge is? Do you know where the grass bridge is? And this bridge has been maintained for over 500 years, since Incan times. And the way it's maintained is basically every couple of years, it has to be rebuilt. And so in a way, what makes it permanent is its impermanence, that these 3 villages that are near the bridge come together. It's a 3-day ceremony. They weave a new bridge out of grass. Every family has to contribute a certain amount of grass. And so it's still here 500 years later.
Well, what's interesting there, gosh, I'm going to be in all sorts of tangents because really what I want to get to is sort of your process of writing these books and the super achievements you've done. But you just made me think, what's interesting about that is not so much the bridge, although that's fascinating also, but the ritualized aspect. Like they get together for a 3-day ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so many of these places that in this book are not just about the place, but about the ritual around them or the obsessions of the people who create these places. And I find that it's kind of obsession and ritual create location in a weird way.
That's terrific. Yeah. I mean, like, one thing that this book is not is a collection of like oddities. It's not, roadside attractions. It's not things that are just weird. It's things that are or strange. It's things that are profoundly strange. Things whose strangeness tells you something about people and how people work and how the universe works and what motivates people. And like, I mean, it's when you scratch the surface of the strange, like here's the last Incan grass bridge, you get into a story about tradition and culture and
right. So it's
technology.
Like each place is not about like, oh, go to this longitude and latitude and you're going to see something interesting. Each place is about kind of the story. It's like the top of a pyramid and all the way underneath is the story and the layers of story that create it. Like, and I didn't mean to get into like the specific locations until later in the interview, but tell me about there was one that fascinated me and I kept running across it every time I went through the book. The Dollhouse Museum, where it's all crime, like murder crime scenes. It's all like dolls of murder crime scenes.
The nutshell studies of unexplained death, I think is what it's called. It's in Baltimore. And these were created.
I'm definitely visiting this place.
Yeah.
It's like the Dexter of dollhouses.
Well, there were these little dollhouse scenes that were created for forensic detectives to train themselves, right? Because, it's not like you have murder crime scenes all the time that somebody can go and learn the ropes of how to become a forensic detective by just going from crime scene to crime scene. These really intricate dioramas, and they're miniature, were created, and they've got little clues hidden all over them about what might have caused,
like the blood spatter is just exact.
Exactly. Or, the placement of the wrench. And so detectives would use these to train themselves, to study crime scenes and try and understand how they work and what are the details to pay attention to. And now they're actually kind of have become this beautiful work of art. I mean, they were created quite a while ago.
I mean, just the photos you took, it looked like a beautiful work of art. And I can imagine how many of these scenes are there? How many dolls were made?
I'm not sure, actually, how many
Is
there
it
are.
like in the hundreds?
I don't know if it's in the hundreds, but I think it's, maybe a dozen.
And who made it? Who thought like, oh, I'm going to make dolls of murder scenes?
Right. No, I mean, this. I'm trying to remember the story. There's 700 places in the book. I don't remember all of the details, but
I'm sorry that one in particular stood out because literally every time I opened the book, somehow it fell.
It's a jarring image, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, it was. I believe she was commissioned to create these for. I think it was the Baltimore Police Department. They're certainly in Baltimore today.
And it's open to the public to see it.
I think my recollection of trying to go see it, I haven't actually seen them myself. I remember having to call somebody to try and get in, and I wasn't able to get in at the time that I wanted to get in, so I actually haven't seen them myself, but I know one of my co-authors has.
Okay, so it is seeable if you work it out.
And every place in the book, I mean, some of them seem quite inaccessible. Every place in the book, theoretically, well, except for the places that are, a mile underground, can basically be visited.
Well, I'm going to ask you about the mile underground, but first I'm going to challenge you a little bit. There's the CIA museum. Is that accessible to the public?
Well, you may need to know somebody to get into that.
What is the CIA museum?
So in Langley, the CIA actually keeps a collection of sort of their greatest treasures, some of which are, you can imagine, still quite matters of national security.
Like Bin Laden's beard, is that there?
I don't know if Bin Laden's beard is there, but that's the kind of thing that they hold on to, and typically it's only accessible to people with the appropriate CIA clearance.
And is there any way, like, if you and I were to go there and say, hey, we're doing research, like, can we come see it?
Here's the thing I've discovered. Like, most of the time when something is quote unquote off limits or inaccessible, it really isn't if you tell the right story and you approach it in the right way with like the right spirit and enthusiasm to the person who holds the key, to whatever the place is. I say that as a journalist, and being just, saying I'm a journalist opens a lot of doors sometimes. Sometimes it closes doors. But in my experience, if you don't take no for an answer on the first time and you just ask in the right way, you can often get in to places that you wouldn't think a normal civilian would be able to get into.
Like, what are some techniques you use to get? I mean, because this applies to anything. Like, I might want to have access to anything, like a fashion show or a movie opening or one of these museums or one of these obscure places you mentioned.
I remember I was passing through New Orleans a few years ago, and I think it was Tulane University has a wonderful collection of medical oddities, basically.
Like what?
Oh, like fetuses in jars and that sort of thing. And it's like sort of a morbid collection of stuff. And it's in like the second floor of a building that is not open to the public. It's for medical students to study, and actually probably hasn't even really been useful for 100 years, but they hang on to this stuff anyways. And I remember I found out about this, and it wasn't open to the public, and I sent an email, I called, and I said, look, I love this stuff. I'm really enthusiastic about it. I'm going to be in New Orleans. Would you mind if I just popped by and saw it? And by the way, I think I was, 21 years old at the time. So I'm a student. And they said, sure, but just don't take any pictures. And so I got in and I got to see that. And oftentimes,
do you ever sneak pictures
No,
little pen camera like James Bond?
We try with Atlas Obscura. We're trying to be respectful of these places, and we want them to thrive, and we want we consider all of these places like our partners. There are.
They benefit from it.
Well, some people would say, look, you're shining a light on all these obscure places. Like, aren't you worried you're going to ruin them by making them well known? And that was a concern that we had when we launched the website, and then subsequently with the book. And in the 7 years that we've been running Atlas Obscura, we've seen a lot of places in the Atlas disappear, close down, go out of business. And they don't disappear because they're overloved. They disappear because they're underloved. And so we want to celebrate these places, get people out seeing them, exploring them, and hopefully keeping them around so that they can be available for all of us.
So again, I want to get into kind of your process and how you put this together, but I just want to tell you one story. A few weekends ago, after I got the book, I was looking at places, obviously, in New York City, and I saw the museum.
Mm-hmm.
I got a couple M's on both sides,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like basically the smallest museum in New York City, if not the country, for all I know. And I decided I'm going to take my kids to it. And it's not so far from where I live. And I kind of took an obscure way to get there, like going through all these back alleys in Chinatown. And they're like, Daddy, where are you taking us? And I'm like, don't worry. And we get to this alley in, basically between Chinatown and Federal, the City Hall area. And there's a woman sitting across the street, and it's basically, like you say, it's in this, it's this museum entirely in this elevator room. And it was fascinating, the objects in this one room little museum. And there were people there. And my kids we spent like 20, 30 minutes looking at each exhibit. Like there was one exhibit of pictures of final text messages. So the final text messages people got before somebody else, the person texting them died. And it was such an interesting, that was one of the exhibits. There were other exhibits in there, but all within this one little elevator. And there was maybe a dozen people checking things out and people coming and going. And my kids were fascinated by it. What a great experience to give to them.
So, one of the ideas behind Atlas Obscura is we can all be explorers. We don't have to go off to, the Amazon or climb Mount Everest to find wonder all around us. And in compiling the book, one of the things we wanted to do is we knew we were going to have readers in all over the world, but especially in the United States and major cities opening up this book. And we wanted to make sure that they were also surprised. That if you were a New Yorker opening the book, you'd be like, oh my God, I didn't know these things existed in New York City.
Yeah, it's funny. I would say, so you do cover basically the entire world. And New York City is only It's only page 359. I remember the page number.
Alas, in the scheme of the world, New York City is still only one city out of hundreds.
Page 359 out of whatever 470 pages. But I knew about 1/3 of the places, and maybe I've been to.
You're a pretty curious guy.
Yeah,
so.
and also I've been all over. I feel like I'm an explorer too. Like I like to find the obscure oddities in the places where I live. So I like this idea that anybody can be an explorer, and you almost having the heart and mind of an explorer keeps life interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that must have been your original appeal to doing this. Like, why did you start doing this?
No, that is the idea. Is like.
We all explore life, otherwise it's boring.
That's right. And what Atlas Obscure is about is like helping people put on a pair of glasses that makes them look at the world a little bit differently and see the possibilities that are around them that they might otherwise not know about, they might walk past. I mean, do you know that we are just a couple blocks away from a place called the Earth Room? You ever been to the Earth Room?
I haven't been to the Earth Room.
Okay, so it's maybe 4 blocks from here. You ring a buzzer. You go up to this, I think it's the 3rd floor. And it's a room filled 3 feet deep with earth in the middle of Soho, with dirt. It's been there since like the 70s. And I guarantee you've walked past it a million times. And we want to encourage people to press that button.
Why did that guy do that? Why did that guy?
It's actually a notable work of art by Walter de Maria, who's a famous land artist and from the 70s, and it's just been there waiting for people to ring that bell.
Does he grow anything in the dirt?
No, it's just dirt.
Just dirt. So, and it's in an apartment he owns?
It's not. I mean, it's in a studio.
A studio?
It has to be watered regularly, and when you walk in, you smell.
Why does it have to be watered? Why does dirt have to be watered?
Maybe to keep it from like it's getting dusty. I don't know, but I think then it may actually just be part of the art. You know?
No, actually, from where we're sitting right now, when I was going down the list of places in New York City, there's quite a few places like within, let's say, a mile radius of here.
And if you go on the website, especially if you're on a mobile phone, there's a "What's Near Me," and hopefully wherever you are in the world, and when you click "What's Near Me" on atlasobscure.com, you will find something that will surprise you and delight you and make you.
Cool.
Well, and expand your sense of what is possible in the world, which is really what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and it makes you think too, what can I do to, eventually I'm going to die, but what can I do or what can I create in this world that's a location that other people might want to see that's so interesting and, as we keep using the word obscure, but so interesting and obscure that people say, I can't see this anywhere else. I'm going to explore this.
I love the way you just framed that. I hope all of your listeners will actually take that question and try and come up with an answer to it.
Yeah, because it's a challenge not only to find places, but to create a place.
Yeah, and if everybody thought about things that way, what an interesting world we would live in.
Yeah. So I want to take a step back and look at your process, because obviously you're a super successful author, but you have a particular thing. It's not just you writing about these topics. And in fact, I would argue this book is more designed and researched than written. It's an idea that I mean, this is like almost like a sculpture, the way you've done this book. It's a nice, you can't, I wouldn't recommend people get this on Kindle. Like, you have to get the book. It's a beautiful looking book.
Yes, don't get it on Kindle. Buy the hardcover.
Yeah. And, but then also with Moonwalking with Einstein, it's not like, I'm going to write a book about, you could have gone 3 different ways with that book, and you chose the correct way, I think. You could have said, I'm going to write about this weird little subculture of people who are obsessed with memory and compete in these memory championships. Or you could have written a how-to. Here's how you become, the U.S. memory champion, and you could have interviewed a lot of people and had all the exercises and so on. But instead, you threw yourself into the experience, so you became the U.S. memory champion, and you document that along the way. And ultimately, that's what makes it a page-turner and such a best-selling and evergreen book. I mean, it's a good book to read right now, 10 years later, or 10 years after the experience. So, and just like with this, you throw yourself into the experience. You built a company around this idea. You have an entire team of people submitting obscure places to you. You've been to many of these places. And I know from what we've talked about with your next book, Hunters and Gatherers, you've lived in the Congo exploring the last tribe of hunters and gatherers. You don't just write about them, you experience these things. And so how did you kind of cultivate this process, or say to yourself, okay, this is the kind of writer I'm going to be? And then when do you have the time to write? You're doing all this. You're becoming the U.S. memory champion. When did you write?
Right. So the experience that made me a journalist and made me the kind of journalist that I've become, or the kind of whatever it is that I am.
But you're like an independent journalist. It's not like you're a reporter anywhere.
No, that's true. I don't work for any particular magazine, and I would like to. I've tried to set up my life so that I can explore the things that I'm curious about and really go deep into them, and sometimes get in over my head, which is really what happened with the memory contest.
Literally.
Yeah, I mean, I did not expect that the outcome of that process of exploring this world and becoming curious about it was going to be that I was going to become the U.S. memory champion. That was not when I set out on day one what I thought was going to happen. But that's like basically I want to just keep pulling at the thread until I figure out where it ends or where it takes me. And that all my process started, I guess, in college. I spent a summer. I bought an old minivan and spent 2 months driving all over the country. Basically, my mission was to have an interesting experience every day that I could then write about.
Okay,
And
so let's talk about that for a second. So you had a mission.
Yeah.
So part of exploring is to have a mission. It
I
might
really
change.
think so. Yeah.
So I'm gonna write that down. Hold on. Mission, and so your mission in this case was to have an interesting experience every day.
Right.
I sort of feel you still do that, but just not with a van.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's a good mission. And that experience, I was like, I went to Bob Jones University, which is the famous evangelical college in South Carolina that had banned interracial dating until like three years before I arrived. And I told them that I was interested in transferring. So they put me up in the dorms, and
Did you write about that? I think
when I was 20 years old. Yeah, I mean, this was the set of experiences that set me on the path that I'm on today. And
I feel like you wrote about it, and that was like a known article. Did I read that from you or from somewhere else?
So I don't think I ever published it. I mean, I did write it, but I don't think I published it. Anyways, I spent 8 weeks going all over the country doing that, and I just fell in love with that process of trying to like put myself into uncomfortable situations, figure them out, and come out of it with a story that I could tell. And if you know that, like, I don't know.
How do you identify an uncomfortable situation?
Oh, your body can tell you when you're uncomfortable.
But like, let's say right now, I challenged you and said, okay, tomorrow I want to do something that makes me uncomfortable. And as you put it really well. Starts out as a thread, but I want to follow that thread to see how far I can go. And that's the story. At the end is somehow the story, or the process of following that thread to the end is the story. So what's the process of coming up with an uncomfortable situation? I know it when I see it, but how do I start seeing it?
What are you curious about?
I don't know. I guess you have to have a way of cultivating that curiosity. Like you were curious about going to the Bob Jones University. Like how did you get curious about that?
Because I read an article about it, I couldn't believe this place existed.
So kind of like reading a lot.
Yeah.
About where would you read stuff?
Well, on Atlas Obscura. I mean, like seriously, part of the reason that Dylan and I created Atlas Obscura was to be like a place that would collect this kind of the kinds of things that would spur us to get out in the world and explore. So,
So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So the museum I went to with my kids, the small museum, there was one exhibit of the guy who's made like 3,400 patents. Do you know that guy's name? The Japanese scientist.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And he was having his birthday.
Is his name?
He's having a birthday party tonight, by the way, at that museum. And unfortunately, I'm going out of town. Otherwise, I would have gone to it. But I could see potentially that's something that makes me curious, following that guy around or exploring his story and seeing what he does next or going to his birthday party. So you could see that there's lots of almost clues in this book to lead you to other interesting experiences.
And that is what we hope will happen. Like our hope is that this book and the website will be a guide to people who want to have those kinds of experiences and like a spur to say, you know what? Like this is available to you. You don't even have to get on a plane and go somewhere. This kind of experience is all around us if you're just willing to get off your butt and go make yourself uncomfortable.
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took
Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
Let's brainstorm for a second. Let's say I live in, I don't know, Cincinnati, Ohio, or Kansas City, just someplace in the like New York City. Like you mentioned, 3 blocks away, there's somebody who has 3 feet of dirt in his house. Like that doesn't happen in most towns.
Oh, but it does. And that's the incredible thing. Oh, but it does. Like, you're going to Kansas. I would recommend you check out Layla Cahoon's Hair Museum. There's a woman who collects 19th century Victorian hair art.
Hair art? What's hair art?
Well, in Victorian times, one of the ways that you commemorated or remembered somebody that you loved was to make like a brooch or a necklace or a bracelet out of their hair. And so this woman has collected all of these and now has them on display.
It's so funny because it reminds me of I was walking in Tribeca the other day, and there was a place called Soho Photo, and the place itself seemed almost uninteresting. Like there was photo exhibits, whatever, in like a lot of places. But then you go to the bathroom, and in the bathroom was what they call their family photo collection. And it was photos they had picked up from yard sales over the years of basically these from 1900 to now, photos of people getting married that they picked up at yard sales. And it was just covering this bathroom. So it was essentially the most interesting bathroom I've seen in New York City. I should submit it to Atlas Obscura.
You absolutely should. You absolutely should. That's exactly the kind of thing that we would have in Atlas
And so
Obscura.
potentially like an experience there is I could go and interview what happened to many of these couples that are now, they're memorialized in this bathroom.
Right. I want that. I mean, yeah, it could be fun.
But I like the word uncomfortable though. That's curious, but it's not necessarily uncomfortable. So what's something that makes you uncomfortable that you could potentially start researching tomorrow? I want to figure out for someone listening, they wake up, they have their normal 9-to-5 job, but they're going to say, you know what, I'm going to do something uncomfortable today and maybe even journal about it or document it, not necessarily be a reporter or write a book about it, but do something that makes myself or go somewhere where I'm uncomfortable. How can they start to figure that out?
All right, so here's like a fun assignment for your next time let's say you've got a 4-day weekend.
Yeah.
All right, you got a 4-day weekend. You have $100 in your pocket. How far can you get?
Yeah. And that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right?
And get a friend and see who can get farther.
Yeah. That's
Make
interesting.
it a competition.
Make a bet.
Yeah.
All right. So that's interesting. I'm pushing you. What's another one?
Okay.
Just like, what would you do? Like tomorrow you wake up and someone says, Josh, do something uncomfortable that potentially you're going to journal about or tell a story about later.
Okay. What would I like to do?
Like, what's your interest you could take your interest from interest to uncomfortable?
Right. Well, so, I mean, obviously what I spent the last 4 years doing, which is living in the middle of the rainforest in the Congo with Mbengele pygmies, who are the largest remaining group of hunter-gatherers on the planet. Has been pretty uncomfortable. And I've learned a lot from that discomfort from being with people who think about the world entirely differently and live entirely differently from.
Were you ever in danger?
I mean, it's all relative, but I've never really felt scared over there. I'm with people who are experts at living in the forest.
Yeah.
And, they'll let me know when I need to be scared.
But it's still uncomfortable. You're in the middle of a totally unique environment, the last tribe of hunter-gatherers in the world.
Yeah, not the last tribe, but the largest remaining tribe. There are hunter-gatherers in a number of places still left on the planet.
So again, Kansas City, you wake up and you want to get uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing. Here's one that I once did. You go down to a temporary work center, a temp center, where people are lining up to get minimum wage jobs. Go do that for a day.
Yeah.
Go talk to the people who do that every day. That's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you will learn a lot.
It's amazing how many people actually don't do stuff like that because they do their 9-to-5 thing and they figure, okay, the weekends or the 4-day weekends, I need to just sit around and relax and cool down. But sometimes something like that, rather than relaxing, gives you, if you do something that's out of your comfort zone, it gives you this incredible energy.
Right. Totally.
And it's exciting to do.
And by the way, you'll have something to talk about,
forever.
Right. Yeah.
So a lot of that is like you basically probably have done this many times, but then you took the most incredible experiences, like obviously winning the U.S. Memory Championships and then doing Atlas Obscura, and then these become not only just stories you talk about, but they become books. And not only that, they're page-turning books. Like the U.S. Memory Championships, that was you took us on a ride there. Like that was a thriller. It was a suspenseful book. Are you gonna you were gonna give up? Or you also had it was a how-to. Like you showed us about the Memory Palace and all that, and then you win. And so what's your process then of writing? Like, how did you know to basically take this experience and turn it into a page turner?
That's the part that's really hard for me, at least. I mean, I think there are people who find writing easy. I find it incredibly hard because once you now have this experience, how do you make it interesting to other people and tell it as a story that has all the elements that you just described, which are not necessarily inherent or obvious in the story, but have to be kind of pulled out and sculpted so that the reader is carried along and feels propelled.
Particularly when there's so many more demands on their attention now in these days. I mean, Netflix is going to spend $6 billion on original programming. So that's going to require time from people to absorb.
Yeah.
There's tons of blogs, news articles,
Not
Instagram.
to mention podcasts.
Podcasts, books. I'm definitely aware doing a podcast how many hours a week I expect of someone's time. It's why I don't do at the moment, more than one episode a week, because you can't expect too much. You can't, and this is not saying anything bad about people in general, but there's a lot of demands on people's time and you can't ask for too much. You have to be respectful of it. So when you're writing a book, you have to say, how am I going to get someone to the next page?
Right. That's right.
And how do you do it?
I think you are posing questions, not even necessarily explicitly. You can pose them implicitly that the reader wants to know the answer to.
Like, what do you mean by implicitly?
You can set up something that doesn't quite make sense, and where the reader can start thinking like, how is that going to resolve, or how is that?
So, for instance, you could like close a chapter in the memory book, the Moonwalking with Einstein book. You close a chapter like, my next challenge was
that's
memorizing 200 pages in a row.
Yeah, I mean that's a way of explicitly doing it. But you can also, you tease something. There's something that like you mention even offhandedly that like the reader reads it and says like, that's going to go somewhere, and maybe it doesn't go in the direction that they think that's going to go. But you've set something up that you can resolve later, and if you kind of if you can strip tease the information in the right order, you can keep people with you wanting to find out where it all ends.
Striptease is an interesting word, meaning that you kind of know the whole the end point, but you're not going to give it to them so quickly. You're going to kind of unravel it.
Yeah, and I mean, so part of the hard part of the kind of writing that I do is knowing I know the whole story, right? But you don't know the story, and I need to reveal the story to you detail by detail by detail in a way that like I don't want to tell you how it's going to end up front. And I want to make sure that I'm telling you just enough that you want to keep going.
And I feel the best nonfiction writers, like let's say you, Malcolm Gladwell, the guys who wrote Freakonomics, AJ Jacobs, many of these people actually have been on the podcast. I feel they do it. I feel also, of course, the best fiction writers do it because that's their game, is to have cliffhangers as much as possible. But why do you think most nonfiction writers don't do it? Like I feel most nonfiction writers fail at this part.
That's hard. I mean, and
like they know their information, but they don't necessarily know how to striptease it.
Yeah, and well, it's also like if you're an academic, that is not the way an academic structures his writing that he's doing for his academic audience.
Right.
It's in fact the inverse of that, right? You start with the results, and then you get into your methodology, and then and I think that's one of the reasons that academics sometimes have trouble transitioning to writing for more popular audiences.
And they're even looked down upon within academia when they try to popularize their work sometimes.
Which is just ridiculous and
of course.
and absurd.
Yeah.
But I think it is sometimes true.
So when you left Moonwalking with Einstein, so you had that experience, you wrote about it. I think it's even being optioned for a movie now, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if it's actually going to be turned into a movie, but
it's an interesting story.
One
Let
can
me know
hope.
when the option runs out.
Right.
I'll buy it.
Okay.
And then how did you start to get into this Atlas Obscura?
So really, this started as like a side project, like basically like an art project. Me and Dylan were like, this thing should exist, and let's make it exist. And we put it out there. It was a pretty simple website when we launched, and people started contributing places from all over the world, and the community kind of grew up around it. So over time, what had been a kind of side project turned into a business, and we were able to start hiring people. We started to have advertisers coming to us and saying, hey, you've got like relatively young people who are out exploring the world. That's kind of interesting. We'd like to advertise with you. And now it's become this kind of like snowball. It's rolling down the hill, and we keep picking up new things, and it gets bigger. We do now events in 7 cities around the country every weekend.
You should do like flash events too. Like, hey, everybody in New York, we're going to show up at, this back room speakeasy bar.
That's kind of what we do. That is kind of what we do. And we do it. So in New York, Philly, San Francisco, LA, DC, Chicago, soon Boston. And I think we just launched in Seattle as well.
What's the business model behind doing those events?
First of all, they're great fun. People pay for tickets.
Okay.
And we have people in each of those cities who are organizing those events who are getting paid to organize them.
This is what's really remarkable about this, and I'm kind of just impressed in a variety of ways. Not because I realized initially I was impressed from a writing perspective, but now from a business perspective, you basically took what was a passion of yours, doing this art project, and not the passion of your life. I'm sure you've been passionate about many things, but you took this passion and somehow, alongside all of your other stuff, you planted enough seeds where you saw this was growing and it became a business. Like suddenly, naturally, it became a business. You didn't have to force it into a business. Like people started calling you to advertise. And is this now like your business? Are you going to build this for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, so we're going to hopefully turn this into the defining media enterprise around the themes of wonder and curiosity and exploration for our generation. That's our ambition. In the same way that National Geographic defined those values for the 20th century, we would like to, when you think about the world as an incredible place, we want you to think about Atlas Obscura and to experience that through Atlas Obscura.
You should, like, I noticed you have on the site, you list kind of quite a few employees. Like, if you don't mind saying, what's the current revenues of the business roughly?
I will not answer that directly, except to say that we got 18 full-time employees, and we're making it work as a business.
And you haven't raised any money?
No, we have raised some money
From venture capitalists?
And some media investors. Yeah.
You know what you should do? You should reward people who donate a lot of places. You should make people like real explorers. Like
we're working on it.
All-star explorers and have different levels.
Yeah, and you can see your rankings now of
oh really?
How many like you could be the most curious person in New York City if you have been to, well, we have over 300 places in New York City in the Atlas, and I don't know anybody who's been to all 300.
Because think about it. Yeah, well, that's an interesting way of ranking too. Like who's been to each place and proven it, like taking a photo of each place. Like if you think about it, ranking systems work. We're tribal creatures. So when we find a tribe we want to belong to, we want to be the alphas and not the omegas. And so ranking works. Like you look at, Quora has the top Quora writers. Foursquare had the mayors of each, place. So you should have something similar for this.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the cool things is like we've created these communities in these cities of people who really do see the world in this way and are constantly prodding themselves to explore and find new things and create ways for them to interact with each other. And that's been tremendously gratifying to have people who are actually out in the world doing things because of Atlas Obscura.
So there's a couple of interesting things to point out here. One is a lot of people have an interest or a passion and they'll explore it themselves, but it never turns into anything. You actually did something. You created a website. You kind of recruited other people to help. What do you think was that impetus to do rather than just think, oh, wouldn't this be a neat idea?
Well, Atlas Obscura is driven, like it's mission driven. We have a mission. We want people to experience that sense of wonder that we crave. And we have a feeling that it's a good thing and that when people experience it, they recognize it as a good thing.
But I feel like you have this talent of actually doing, whereas a lot of people don't do.
Well,
I don't do when I have a good idea. I often don't do it.
I'll tell you, in all the projects I've worked on, I've been extremely lucky to have great partners. And
so that's key.
Yeah, finding people who can execute. So my co-founder, Dylan Thuris, is a fantastic human being. 2 years ago, we hired a CEO for Atlas Obscura named David Plotz, who's a fantastic executive. And, we built a team of people who can actually realize this mission and realize this idea in the world.
And even with moonwalking with Einstein, it's not like you did it by yourself. Like you had all these other memory experts that you would consult. You would call up Anders Ericsson, an expert on peak performance and memory, who you would consult. So you kind of build, when you have a mission that you're going to get you from just thinking about it, like when you wake up in the morning, to actually doing it. It seems like you build your virtual or real team around it to help you do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think once you can see what this thing is going to be, then you can convince other people to see it, and you can rally a team around it, and you can get people, directed towards a goal. That's really fun.
So I want to ask you about some of the places in the book. Some of them you might know about because it's in the book.
Yeah.
Others you might not know about.
Some of them I maybe have been to. Probably most of them I have not.
There's so many places in the book, and some of them are so obscure, I doubt you've been to all of them. But I wanted to ask you about this Karasta prison hotel. So this was a prison that's now a hotel where they actually subject you to, it's immersive, so they actually subject you to interrogations and all this sort of stuff.
Right, because why not?
I've never stayed at a hotel that was like a kind of theatrical experience as well.
Yeah, well, there could be a whole Atlas Obscura book on the craziest places you could be staying in the world.
You mentioned a couple of them.
There are a couple.
One in Finland you have, it's like all snow or ice or whatever.
There's ice hotels, sure. There are some really fun treehouse hotels. It could almost be its own guide. And maybe one day it will be.
Yeah, you should divide this up and put like, okay, the 100 most amazing hotels, the 100 most obscure hotels in the world.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll do that. But in terms of curating the book, we wanted to have a few of every different kind of wonder. So we didn't want to have too many anatomical museums. We didn't want to have too many strange collections. We didn't want to have too many natural wonders. We didn't want to have too many unusual places to stay.
So that's part of the process too. You had to decide like you're going to diversify across all the ways people can explore.
Right, and we also wanted to cover the whole world. So, we kind of had to have something from everywhere, and that was a bit of a balancing act, figuring out what kind of places to have from each spot. Yeah.
This next place was fascinating. The Turda salt mine, where, what is it? You go like a mile, like it was a salt mine in the Roman Empire.
Yeah, for like thousands of years. And now it's an amusement park.
At the bottom.
Deep underground. Yeah.
How do you get there? Like an elevator?
I believe so. And it's one of the, it's now, I mean, it's funny. You mention it because it seems so extraordinary. It's actually one of the probably least obscure places in the book to the people who live nearby. I mean, so people in Romania, it's become actually a big tourist destination in Romania, even though us here in New York have no idea. And like you see pictures of it and it's absolutely stunning. You can't believe this exists on planet Earth. This like crazy
I can't. When I
amusement
look
park
at
at
this
the bottom
picture,
of you know thousands of feet down.
I can't even understand what I'm looking at when I look at the photo.
It's like from another planet.
Yeah.
And yet, no, it's right here on planet Earth with us.
So it was a salt mine basically where Romans would get salt for 1,000 years. And then somehow or other, some guy decided, how did they decide to make this amusement park at the bottom?
Right. Well, because like clearly somebody had this vision of like how amazing would this be to bring people down here and like give them this set of experiences in this most improbable of places that's physically stunning and stunning and created by man, right? I mean, it's a mine, or it started as a mine.
How would they even build like the amusement park down here?
I couldn't tell you. A lot of pulleys is my guess.
Wow. So, okay, again, I'd like to know all the most obscure amusement parks out there.
Yeah, that could be its own.
This is certainly one of them.
Yeah.
Oh, this was so fascinating. Does this still exist, this place? The Kingdom of Women.
Right. So one of the funny things that happens in Atlas Obscura is, and when we started the site, we weren't sure, like, were we going to get faked, right? Are people going to submit stuff? Like,
this almost sounds fake.
So the first time I read
describe this place.
Okay. This is an area in China where that is essentially a matriarchy. You've got polyandry, so a woman can have multiple husbands.
Does that exist anywhere else in the world, a place where women can have multiple husbands?
This is the most famous example. And when it was first submitted to Atlas Obscura, it was submitted by some user. I remember reading it and being like, I don't think that, like, that sounds like BS. I mean, is this like some, anthropologist kind of like imagination running wild? Is this actually real? It is real. And
so I can visit there right now, and there's all these women walking around who basically kind of rule the kingdom.
Right.
And but from the age of 13 on, they're women, and men can visit them.
Right.
They don't know who the father is if they have babies.
Right.
So this exists.
Yes, this exists on planet Earth with us. And you could be on a plane, you could be there in, 18 hours from now.
And can you become a citizen of this kingdom?
Oh, it's not actually a kingdom. it's a region.
It's like China allows this to exist, or wherever this is. I don't even know.
Yeah, it's in pretty a rural part of China. Yeah. And so that's like part of what the book is about. Is like we want you to have a sense of just how much possibility there is in the world. These places exist and exist today, and they're sharing this planet with us.
And it would be amazing to like talk to some of these women and like feel what their experience is like from beginning to end, really, and how their experience is different from women who live here, for instance.
Yeah, this would be a good one to blow out into a longer article.
Many of these places.
So part of what we're doing here is, we tried to cram over 700 places into a book that, could actually be bought for an affordable price. This is going for something like $21 on Amazon right now. $35 is the hardcover price. It's the suggested retail price. We had to make choices, and we had to be brief. But many of these places could be, whole books in themselves.
I mean, just as an example, and I don't want to talk about this place. People can read about it when they buy the book. But right above the Kingdom of Women is the Dwarf Empire.
Right.
So I'll leave that to the imagination of the reader, because there's more places. These giant Buddha statues of Asia. And you have all these Buddha statues, and then this tiny thing to the right is the Statue of Liberty,
right,
and it's all drawn to scale.
I get it now. These things are really, really big.
Like this biggest Buddha. Have you ever visited it?
No. And I don't even. What is the total height? It's like over 600.
420 feet, 502 feet. And the Statue of Liberty, I didn't realize this is only 151 feet.
I guess.
Oh, no, 325 feet.
Maybe that's with the pedestal. I don't know.
Yeah, 325 feet versus 502 feet. So that's a pretty big Buddha. But there's a whole bunch of these Buddhas that are bigger than the Statue of Liberty.
Big Buddhas are a thing all over Asia. And so we tried to collect the biggest of them.
It seems antithetical to what Buddha would have wanted. Like, Buddha probably wouldn't have wanted these 500-foot statues of him.
Isn't that kind of how religion goes, though? It's not always what the founder had in mind.
Right, exactly. So that's interesting. And you list all of them and where they are. I've got a bunch of other places. We're just going to keep quickly going through them. So sometimes I have these notes. I just have a piece of paper on each page, but each place on the page is interesting. So I have to figure out what I
Which one you're... Okay, good.
So if people make jokes about this. Where does all the unclaimed luggage go? You found the place.
In fact, I've been there. Yeah, it's pretty fun basically it's in northeastern Alabama, and
The unclaimed baggage center.
right, because it's got to go somewhere. And so all the airlines send whatever is unclaimed to this giant warehouse. It's basically like a humongous thrift store.
Why don't they put everything up on eBay?
They may be starting to do that at this point.
Okay.
I don't know. And, it's all sorts of weird stuff, right? Obviously, a lot of clothes, a lot of, bathing suits are the kinds of things people lose in their luggage, but also like, film props and, weird pieces of technology, because everything ultimately that gets around this country is going on a plane.
What's the weirdest thing you saw there?
Oh, so there's a film prop from the name of the movie is eluding me. I actually haven't seen the movie. If you've got the book in front of you, it's in the book.
Labyrinth.
Right, right. It's from Labyrinth. What's the name of the character?
Hoggle, the curmudgeonly dwarf puppet.
Right. So he's there, and he just got left in somebody's luggage, and they decided actually not to sell him, but to put him on display. There's a little museum area where they've cordoned off kind of the stuff that was too good to resell.
And where in Alabama is this?
It's near Huntsville. What, Tuscaloosa is the...
Oh, Scottsboro,
yeah.
So interesting. All right, on to the next one, because we're passing the crypt of civilization, the
One of the
Angola
oldest.
prison rodeo.
Yeah.
But we're going to. We already spoke about the CIA museum. So I'll go to the next one. And we already spoke about the nutshell studies of unexplained death. By the way, that picture is just disturbing.
Yeah.
And those are dolls.
Those are little mini dolls. Yeah.
So I'm looking at a doll of a woman who's been murdered, and there's blood coming. She's on the bed. So there's blood coming out of her mouth and near her back, and then there's another murdered person on kind of a futon next to her.
So have you figured out who did it yet?
My guess is the guy on the futon stabbed her, hence the blood coming out of her mouth, and then shot himself right there and falls to the ground.
Okay.
Am I right or wrong?
I have no idea.
I watch a lot of crime shows. New York. Well, okay. I only put this here because I live here. I've been to a bunch of these places. What's the most fascinating places for you in New York City?
I mean, some of the ones that are really that you are such a part of the fabric of the city, and that you've been past a million times and just didn't notice. Another kind of conceptual art piece. Do you know about the Times Square hum?
No.
So
Times Square hum?
Hum.
No.
There's a piece of conceptual art, it's musical, that is playing underneath one of the grates in Times Square. It emits this kind of low-level hum. It's been doing it since the 70s.
Oh my God, that's great.
You've walked over it a million times, and it's just there inviting you to stop for a second and put your ear to the grate and listen.
It's funny you mention that, because you don't mention kind of one of the big things that people always surprise people with when they visit New York is the area in the underlevel of Grand Central.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
I'm curious why you didn't put that one in there. Is it
could have
because it's
been
too common? Or?
We thought about that one. We thought a lot of people know about it. And
Okay.
even though it's a great one, and everybody going through Grand Central should do that at least once, there's a parabolic sort of whispering chamber. If you go to two opposite ends of one of the little domed areas of Grand Central.
Right outside the Oyster Bar.
Right outside the Oyster Bar, you can whisper to somebody across the room.
Right, and they hear you, even though
crystal
they're
clear.
far away, they never would hear the whisper. They can hear you through the wall, how the acoustics go.
Yeah, and look, if we were going to do a book dedicated to New York, of course that would be in there. But we have 3 pages to cover the very best of New York, and we wanted to make sure that we were surprising even New Yorkers with things that they didn't know about.
What about L.A.? I'm going there in a few months. What should I hit in L.A.?
Well, I mean, have you ever been to the Museum of Jurassic Technology?
No.
Well, that's got to be top of your list.
What is it? What is Jurassic technology?
Well, I actually almost don't want to tell you anything else. I want you to go to the museum and experience it for yourself.
Okay.
It's one of the most unbelievable, eccentric, brilliant museums. It's almost a museum of the museum, and about what museums are, and about what wonder is, and surprise. And it's kind of everything in the museum is at this frontier between the real and the not quite real, and you're never quite sure what side of the line an object is on. And I actually don't want to tell you anything
All
more
right.
about it because I want you to experience it. And then after you experience it, I want you to call me up and tell me what you think about it.
All right, I will. And what's is there any kind of like Hollywood-esque things in LA that's sort of mysterious?
Oh, so many. Well, there's the Museum of Death. That's actually a bit of a well-known one, but and I haven't actually been to it yet myself. But it's a museum all about death, and in some cases, grisly death. And one of the things you'll notice a thread running through the book. There is like a slight morbid curiosity to Atlas Obscura. We try and keep it kind of like at a low level, I mean, there could be a whole book of like morbidly curious things around the world, but the Museum of Death would definitely be in that book.
So I'm trying to think, like in the next few months, I'm going to New Orleans, San Diego, LA, Phoenix, Miami, and then near Miami, Delray. I really want listeners to send me, or through atlasobscura.com, obscure places I should
Send them to
visit.
you and then send them to us as well.
All right. Well, no, then I'll rank high on Atlas Obscura. I'm going to get my ranking up there. I mean, I'm really just fascinated again by the idea of being an explorer in my life instead of, just sitting there in my comfort zone every single day, like always trying to find the things that are uncomfortable. And I think this is a good starting point, like the places in your site and in this book. And I'm just wondering again more about the process of what is an exploration? Like for you, what does an exploration entail? There's the mission,
right?
There's the uncomfortable situation and seeing where it can lead you. There's kind of finding your team,
right?
To help you,
and then maybe coming away changed at the end, right? Like if it's successful, your understanding of the world is hopefully changed in some way.
Yeah, and then I suppose documenting it because you probably understand a little bit more about how you've changed by documenting it along the way.
So that was the other thing that I figured out on that trip around the country. Was when you have as your end goal to be able to not just have experienced this yourself, but told other people about it, that is an incredible sort of force propelling you, right? Like, I got to go deeper because, like, I can't leave them there, right? I can't leave the story here. I got to, like, really, I got to really push myself into this thing. Like, it would be one thing to just go and visit Bob Jones University. That's not really such a great story. I got to go spend the night. I got to like do it under the cover of being a transfer student. And like, that's how I'm going to really get a great story out of this.
That's fascinating because it reminds me of something when Ryan Holiday was on the podcast for his book, Ego is the Enemy. He described a martial arts instructor who was teaching about how to learn. So, which is a slightly similar but slightly tangential idea, which is that to learn something, you need a plus equals minus. So plus is somebody who's better than you that you could learn from. Equals is someone you can compete with and who challenges you. And minus is someone you can teach. And that's how you learn something, is by finding your plus equals minus. But in your case, to find a good exploration, a plus is some location that makes you uncomfortable or you're insanely curious about. And equals might be your team or how you get going on one of these things. And the minus is this idea that you need to be able to tell a story to somebody. So that's going to kind of inspire you to make the story interesting enough that it's tellable.
Yeah, exactly. And knowing that at the end of the day, like, I've got to frame this in a way that's somebody's going to want to follow it and come along for the ride is I think really helpful.
So related to this is, and kind of the ability to storytell, I think it's interesting to note, and I don't know if this comes up a lot in interviews with you, but obviously your brother is a best-selling novelist, like an incredible novelist, Jonathan Safran Foer, who many people have probably heard of or read his books. Did you kind of get like a little bit of the art of storytelling from him? Did he get it from you? Like, how did that work growing up together? And while he was starting his amazing success with novel writing.
Yeah,
it's a very rare creature, by the way.
I've got a third brother who's also a writer who writes about politics named Franklin Foer.
He's with the New Republic. I forget.
He was with the New Republic, yeah. And it's honestly, I couldn't tell you where it comes from. Like, do
you guys sit around the Thanksgiving table trying to up each other on the stories you're telling?
No, that's the thing. We don't. And in fact, when we get together, we don't even really talk about writing.
Do you ever get jealous of each other? Oh, he just won the Pulitzer Prize, but I'm gonna be on the bestseller.
We are perhaps pathologically non-competitive with each other. In part, maybe because we kind of all do different things. Even though we're all writers, like Jonathan writes novels, Frank covers politics. I do this kind of weird sciencey / experiential stuff. So we're all a little bit in our own kind of separate spaces.
But do you think you've learned from each other a little bit? Like, what would you say you've learned from? Have you read all of Jonathan's novels?
Yeah, of course. And we read each other's works in draft form. And they're my brothers. Besides being my best friends, are my best editors. So,
what do you think you've learned from Jonathan? And I only ask this because he really is like a sort of rare breed where he writes these incredibly literary novels that do also turn out to be bestsellers, which is not so easy to do.
He's good at pointing out where I'm not being funny enough, like in my writing. Like when I'm missing an opportunity to tell a joke or to just up the humor a little bit.
Like what's an example? If you could think of one.
Yeah, I can't think of one right now, but that's one of the things that I think is so wonderful about his books is that they've got a great sense of humor, and he's good at coaxing that out of my writing when he's reading it.
So Josh Foer, once again, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Always a pleasure.
Moonwalking with Einstein was great. I'm so glad you came on to that podcast because not only did you describe the whole experience, you also helped listeners develop better memories, and I recommend that book. But Atlas Obscura, this is like a guide to exploring. Like if it's almost any city or town or country in the world is mentioned in this book, and if you're living in any of these places, this gives you it even gave me. I've been in New York forever, all my life, and it gave me places just a few blocks from where I live to explore with my children. So, and they were fascinated, and I was fascinated. So, what a great book. What a great idea to contribute to the site and to learn from the site. Thanks for coming on and for doing this book.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
For more from James, check out The James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network at jamesaltucher.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
Hey, thanks for listening. Listen, I have a big favor to ask you, and it will only take 30 seconds or less, and it would mean a huge amount to me. If you like this podcast, please let me know. Please let the team I work with know. Please let my guests know. And you can do this easily by subscribing to the podcast. It's probably the biggest favor you could do for me right now, and it's really simple. Just go to iTunes, search for The James Altucher Show, and click subscribe. Again, it will only take you 30 seconds or less, and if you subscribe now, it will really help me out a lot. Thanks again.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.